Hello everyone. Today we will be looking back at our anthologies, our voices in speech and writing parrot books as we call them. So what you'll need your anthology, you'll need highlighters, you'll need your pens, etc. You may already have some notes on some of the texts that we're going to look at, so you may need some extra paper, post-it notes, etc. So to make a start then, what I would like you to do, can you please go to the Tsunami Eyewitness Account text by Chris Rainier? Now, you'll find that as text 7.1. Now, this text is the first person account. It's in the National Geographic and it's a report. If you can just pause for a moment and then read the text, and then we'll go through PAN-TC and key analysis. Okay, we'll start with purpose then. Now remember, we need to be more specific than just saying to inform, to entertain, etc. So having read it, we should understand that he's trying to talk about his experience, having seen the aftermath of the huge tsunami that took place in 2004 on Boxing Day. So the initial purpose of this, actually, he was on the phone to David Braun, who was in Washington DC, who works for the National Geographic News. So actually, he's informing him first, and then David Braun actually put it into text. But we still say that the writer is Chris Rainier. So he's talking about all these horrors and the aftermath of the tsunami. He has also given a first-hand account of how he feels about the damage caused, because obviously it's pretty extensive, like over 300,000 people being killed, and he's more specifically in the area of Banda Aceh. Excuse my pronunciation of that; it might be completely wrong, but that's it. On top of that, another purpose you'll have noticed, he mentions the US a lot and America. He's an American writer. Essentially, I think he's trying to congratulate and show his appreciation of the US military, what they've done, their interventions, and also the support of the UN as a whole following this such a catastrophic event. And then finally, you'll see through the language it's quite emotive and it's quite dark that he is looking at trying to get other people to get involved to offer their support. So you can just pause for a moment now and get down your notes. Okay, our audience for this one, I'll keep it pretty simple. So as I've said before, David Braun is he actually wrote up this kind of transcript. So he was the initial audience. This is who Chris was talking to. Obviously, it's for the National Geographic, so readers of that. Chris Rainier is he was a well-known photographer in his field, so anyone that follows his photography, and those generally interested in natural disasters, current affairs, etc. But obviously, because it was such a big, such a big issue in the news, that obviously quite a lot of people have been reading this. Right, next then, if we look at the modes, so the text type, so it initially was the spoken piece of reportage, it was spoken, but it was edited into an article for the National Geographic News. Just some general stuff on the modes, you've got reportage, what that actually means. It is used to describe the reporting of news. It's normally factual, very journalistic, and it's normally based on a particular event. And then it is often presented with opinions and the actual impressions of a reporter with facts alongside it. So reportage isn't normally just fact, fact, fact. It can be rooted in quite a lot of opinion, which you'll see in this. Okay, topicalities, so what's been spoken about. So Rainier is obviously discussing the aftermath of the 2004 tsunami. He is obviously though reporting 15 days later, so that takes us into 2005. So whilst the event was in 2004, it was written in 2005 because it was on Boxing Day, the initial event. On top of that, he discusses the suffering of the citizens, disease, the amount of deaths, etc. But then also the relief and support that's in place and kind of the issues that has come with that. Okay, and then we have context. So just some general background context. So it was the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake, which happened on Boxing Day, so the 26th of December. It was an undersea megathrust earthquake, really huge earthquake, and subsequently that caused the tsunami. So it caused the deadliest tsunami in history. More than 230,000 people were killed across 14 countries. That's an extreme amount. And then we're looking specifically here at Banda Aceh, the Indonesian city, which had the largest number of victims. That's probably why we're focusing on this text. And the earthquake was one of obviously the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. Okay. So what we need to be doing, can you just make sure you've got your 3 different colour highlighters? We're going to be going through highlighting key evidence, just as we would in class. We'll then label the terminology from across the framework, and then we'll be making some notes, making sure that we are focusing on voice, because remember that is the whole purpose of this examination. Okay. Right, so if we start with the opening paragraph, we'll start with the kind of, well, the opening simile we've got here. So we've got the simile, it's alluding to this renowned catastrophe, so Hiroshima, the huge atomic bomb, and the chaos that that caused. So he starts with that description and that image. So I've just put some notes here, you can pause, you can write these down, but I will be saying additional stuff on top of that. So I've just put here that it does create a voice of panic and disbelief. It was such a vast, such kind of a huge catastrophe. So he's comparing Hiroshima and this tsunami, so you can get the true extent of the devastation. Also, though, it's quite, it's a bit of a different interpretation. Hiroshima was caused by, mankind, whereas this was caused by nature. So you could talk about how powerless people were in this instance. No one is to blame for this. Just the chaos was caused just at the hands of nature. So it makes it a bit more emotive in that sense. They were just completely helpless. So you've got that nice kind of image there, which establishes immediately the chaos. You then have the kind of ambiguous language towards the end, because obviously it's new. This was day 15 he's writing on, and he says, oh, it's probably something like 100,000 people. So you've got that language like probably and something, it's quite ambiguous. So again, it might come across as quite casual considering what he's talking about. So it might seem like, oh, it's only something like 100,000 people. But the whole idea is that they didn't understand at that time how many people had actually died and the actual chaos and damage that was a result of it. So again, it's ambiguous because people just don't know yet. Okay, so if you need any more from that, pause and get the notes down. We then move on to the second paragraph, starts with that kind of immediate, it's day 15, so you've got your nice deixis, it's present tense, it gives you that kind of nice report feature. It's more formal as well, it's contextualising what he's actually talking about, how long it's been and how the disaster is still there. So after 2 weeks, people are still suffering. So you've got that immediately, it's day 15. After that, it goes on to talk about the exposed bodies, decaying, cleaning up, picking up bodies. It remains the biggest challenge. So obviously, we have a semantic field of death. Okay, you can't escape that from this paragraph. It's quite removed from it. The language, bodies, decaying. You could argue it's a bit dysphemistic, but that's the purpose of his text, is literally just informing of the facts. You've got the superlative biggest, as in the biggest challenge is about cleaning up bodies, basically foregrounding, how many people have actually died and how by no means is this, has it been sorted yet. It's still quite a huge issue and there's a lot of work ahead. So again, that semantic field of death, quite gruesome imagery in a sense, but that is sadly the reality of what he is seeing. Okay. Right, third paragraph then. It opens with the medical situation, sorry, is just as daunting. It's declarative, it's pretty clear cut, you've got that kind of assertive tone. And now he starts to explore all the consequences. It's not just about the death, it's the long-lasting impact. So it's about, daunting, that adjective there, it's quite extreme, it's quite ominous. There's challenges ahead for all the survivors, and so there's going to be more support that is needed. So it's making that clear. After that, we've got relief agencies. He starts to talk about the support that is there. But regardless, he then says, with the conjunction, so, but the logistics remain a nightmare. So it is an idiom. You've got a nice little metaphor there. So it's a nightmare. Again, it's quite colloquial, but again, it makes it accessible for the reader. His concern is about the logistics. So yes, there's relief, but it's not going to be easy. So it's literally watching all this happen around him, and he's looking at all the issues that will occur. Right. We then have a bit of a shift in tone here. So now we start talking about the US. So everyone is very impressed with the US military relief effort and the UN's coordination of 200 different charity organisations. So we've got that there. So you've got your plural, everyone, you've got your intensifier, very impressed with the US military. So Rainier speaks on behalf of those in the area, but you could argue the fact that he starts with the proper noun, US military. It's very patriotic, it's that sense of American pride. Look what the US are doing. Could talk about being a little bit boastful about the US's involvement, but he does also talk about the UN on top of that. But again, you could talk about that kind of, as I'll say later, a bit of a self-congratulatory tone. It's like, look what America is doing. Then moves on as well about the challenges that face and how, disease in particular is going to be a big issue. So you've got determiner another when it talks about the another 100,000 people that, they might die from disease. So again, it's showing how many people have died and the issues to come. It's exposing the truth of disaster. They're seeing that the casualties, they're usually shown that the numbers will be in the media. So this amount of people have died. But what he's trying to do is show how these numbers are going to keep rising. Okay. Right, we then have more imagery created here. Okay, so very common for a report. And he makes this reference to kind of religious imagery when he talks about biblical disaster story, but then he compares it to the sketches of Hieronymus Bosch. And it does use parentheses there with a painter of monstrous scenes of hell. Now, Hieronymus Bosch is to take reference to those that understand that element of art, these famous sketches, but it also is hinged on, the biblical disaster story imagery as well. And essentially, this comparison, it's just showing the grotesque kind of image of it. It's a scene from hell. What he is seeing, he can only compare it to something, to a biblical kind of catastrophe. Hieronymus Bosch, I would advise just give it a Google, have a look, and you'll see very clearly the image that he's trying to get across. It's quite emotional, particularly when you think that this is real life. He's making this comparison to these images, but that is actually what he's faced with. And just also bear in mind that he's a photographer, so he's linking to the arts there a little bit. Then he says, however, where he goes, he has to be careful he doesn't step on a corpse. Now, here, we can say it's Dysphemistic language. He's not using euphemisms here. It's quite, it's quite very clearly kind of harsh language. So people could argue it's disrespectful, but it's just what he's experiencing. It's brutal, and how for him it's commonplace for him just to happen upon dead bodies. That is the extent of the damage. The fact that they're everywhere as well, everywhere I go, it's going to make these westernized modern audiences who wouldn't have experienced anything like this before really take a step back and kind of understand the kind of sheer chaos of what he's seen and experiencing. Okay. Right. We then move on to more kind of factual language as he goes on to talk about, what is actually happening. So he moves away from the general imagery to start with. So we've got these facts, statistics of 10 square miles, 25 square kilometres, 30,000 bodies, etc. So you use these statistics, very common for a report. They are common conventions. But again, it's reiterating its purpose to inform the truth, what is happening. So it needs to be hinged in some fact, but then you have your colloquial language as well. So we're saying that the city was completely flattened. Again, it's accessible for the reader, but it also just shows how personal this experience has been for him. Okay, and that quote backs that up too. Right. Some more kind of statistics then here. You've also got your authoritative figure of the government. So you've got the government confirming 95,000 dead and 77,000 missing. Voice has shifted because now we want to look for that for the top marks. We want to be looking at, a shift in voice. It's more factual because it's based on the fact there. He's going by what the government have actually said, but it's also showing the kind of the wide-scale devastation that is struck in this area. So if you just look at them figures, they're going to be quite shocking to the audience, aren't they? On top of that, you've got the 77,000 missing into confirmed dead. Pathos, it's going to evoke sympathy from an audience, isn't it? We're looking at that. There's still going to be rising numbers of deaths. So in 2005, at that point, that's what they thought would happen. They thought they were the amount that were going to be confirmed dead, but we know that over 200,000, verging on 300,000 people are actually confirmed dead. So again, it's going to create a bit of, further sadness for people reading this now. It's going to create further anguish. It might promote people to go on and to donate, etc. as well. But again, you can see there facts and figures used to show the kind of chaos that has happened here. Right, we then move on. We've got a nice subheading as well here now. So, are the emergency supplies of food and medicine getting through to people? So, you've got your subheading. Now, it's in bold as well, it's quite significant. You want to talk about how at this point it becomes more of a political commentary. So, basically, is is the support that's there, are the processes, is what the UN and the US military doing, is it actually effective? And also it's kind of what the audience are thinking of at that time too. So loads of people donating money to this cause, but it's what people are thinking, as with when they donate money to charity in most instances. So where is my money going? Where is the food going? And is this actually worth it? Is the support getting out there to people? So again, is addressing the concerns and like the main question people at home might be thinking. So you've got that there. So are people getting these supplies? You've then got some nice syntactic parallelism. So we still see a lot of people with broken bones. We see people with deep lacerations, la-di-da there. So we can see that. Now again, it creates this kind of chaotic tone. So there's a lot that he is seeing that still isn't good enough. The support, whilst people are trying, it isn't up to scratch just yet because the chaos, and how extreme the kind of event was. People weren't prepared for this. You've then got the image as well, people being covered in it with a dirty rag, just showing that more support is going to be needed and the desperation of what people are experiencing there as well. Okay. Right. We then move back to the kind of the imagery that he was talking about before. So you could argue it's an anaphoric reference back to the references to America before. So you've got your idiom being used when he talks about the US military and how they're working from dawn to dusk. So that's your idiom there. Obviously, it's emphasizing all the hard work that they're doing, their relentless efforts, they're supporting as much as they can. On top of that, then, moving on, it talks about they appreciate the people there, America's help, and how people are coming up to him, giving him a hug, crying in appreciation, etc., of everything that America is doing. So it is emotive. But as I kind of said before, it's a little bit self-congratulatory. So look what America is doing. Look at everything that America is doing to support. So it's that American spirit and pride again. Could argue it's showing the world's reliance on America. So look who has come to the rescue in a sense. It's America. But obviously on top of that, it's just showing how grateful people are there. The citizens, the locals, the tourists that are on holiday there, etc., of all the support that they are being offered. Okay. So it then goes on to say it's going to be interesting to see how the massive amount of money raised in the US and other countries will translate into help on the ground. So he's talking about how, where, and how this money is going to be used. So you've got your adjectival phrase massive amount. So again, look at the amount that people are trying to support. And I've got reference again to the subheading, because we were talking about, where is this money going? So it's trying to address maybe the concerns and the thoughts of the readers about how their money is being used. And then on top of that, got the nice image here that it's the bottleneck that is the challenge. So the bottleneck is a challenge. That's a metaphor. It's essentially saying that there's so much coming in that it's not easy to filter down. So yes, they may have all the resources, but actually giving them out to the right people and actually distributing it isn't easy. It's going to be a challenge. So it's physically showing, through the image of this kind of bottleneck, that there is support, but there's some challenges there about making it more accessible and having to work on how to coordinate that support across the regions that need it. Okay. So we then move back to the bodies and the death, etc. Again, reiterating the purpose of kind of the sheer devastation. So he's saying that people are dying because they are unable to get this basic medical attention. So pretty simple declarative sentence there. It's very matter of fact, they are unable to get this attention. So you've got your verb are, it's quite factual, and it's basically the disbelief that he feels, they're just unable to get basic attention. So again, showing just how huge this issue is, and how there is support there, but again, they're not even getting the basics at the minute. After that, talks about a huge number of people being displaced, so they've got nowhere to live, communities, and how the challenge is going to be to stabilise their communities and set up new places for them to live. So it is an opinion, it's kind of his viewpoint as to what needs to happen next, and this is his kind of closing statement here. It does offer hope, there's movement forward, that's what they need to do. There needs to be new places for them to live. But again, there's a bit of reservation there that, this isn't going to be easy. So it just shows as a whole, he kind of rounds up here that moving forward, they might be on day 15, but there is a long way to come. So a relatively simple text. Obviously, there's more language in there you can analyse, etc. But as you can see, it's quite a good one. So with regards to moving forward, just make sure you've got your evidence, your devices, annotations, blitz through your anthology. And then you need to start thinking more specifically without the comparison for now, but just looking, so what voice is created because of this, the impact of a natural disaster. So obviously you need to talk about context, you need to talk about your terminology. But again, if you follow the structures of what we've been through and the PowerPoint which goes through how to structure a response, that shouldn't be too difficult. Okay, thank you.